Up to the 30, the 20, 10, 5. Torrey Horton back to the end zone.
48-yard play. Guess who? Body up the middle, making another move to the outside. 15, 10, end zone again.
Keeps it. Nice move by Brown. He's got space. He's got 6. 35-yard touchdown for Byron Brown. A record-setting night for the South Florida quarterback.
Down so far, a little bit of a high snap. Genty right up the middle. Genty has room. Ashton Genty, give him 6.
Second and low. Lagar tries to pin it in. Runnels, it does. Runnels stays up. The Showtime is 4-3 wheels. Incredible effort for Runnels.
The G5 Hive. All G5, all the time.
Welcome to the G5 Hive Live, and we are excited to bring you the G5 college football coverage you love each and every week. I am Luke, and I am proudly joined by my co-host, Justice. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, and a retweet. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please leave a rate and review. And don't forget, the G5 Hive merchandise stores is now live. You can get that down here at the link below if you're watching us on YouTube or X. That'll also be in our YouTube video comments as well as pinned on our X page at the bottom of the screen here.
Brings us to our G5 2020 guys. Quarterbacks. 2020 guys, these guys are in the top 20 in pass attempts and the top 20 in passing yards in the G5. Number 1, Chandler Morris, North Texas. He leads the G5 in pass attempts, passing yards, passing completion per game, and total touchdowns. So I want to make sure I got that part right, though. Leads the G5 in pass attempts, passing yards, passing completions per game. All those were per game, not just the passing completions. Starting off a little rocky here for me. Number 2, Jalen Kitna, UAB, averaging 300 passing yards per game. Him and Chandler Morris are the only two averaging 300 or more per game. He is third in the G5 in completions per game with 25. And he is tied for the most turnover-worthy plays in the G5 with 19, which is impressive.
Which is impressive, yeah.
He's started like the last 4 or 5 games. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
I think 4.
Yeah.
So to be up there in the G5 with the most turnover-worthy plays, congratulations. Number 3. This is why we're excited. Chandler Morris in North Texas is number 1. Owen McCown, UTSA, number 3 on this list. He is 4th in the G5 in touchdowns with 20. He's got the least amount of turnover-worthy plays for these 2020 guys with 9. So they take care of the ball and throws a lot. So number 1 versus number 3 for these quarterbacks. Excited for that one. Seth Hennigan comes in at number 4, Memphis. He's actually got the most big-time throws in the G5 with 25. Spencer Petras, Utah State, comes in at number 5. He has been averaging the second most completions per game in the G5 with 27. Joey Aguilar comes in at number 6. App State tied for 5th in the G5 in touchdowns with 19. Tied for the highest average depth of target of the 2020 guys with 11.4 yards. And he's tied for the most turnover-worthy plays in the G5 with 19. And if you've watched much App State, it just seems like there's a little bit of the ball bouncing the wrong way, and then it just seemed like everything that went right for Joey last year is like swung the opposite direction this year, and it's gone like drastically. Like everything's been bad for him in terms of fitting in the ball in tight windows and such. Devin Dampier, New Mexico, comes in at number 7. Tied for last of the 2020 guys for pass completions per game with 19. However, he has the most rush attempts per game of the 2020 guys with 11. Most rushing yards per game of these 2020 guys with 88. And he's tied for the highest average depth of target of the 2020 guys with Joey Aguilar with 11.4. So he might not be throwing the ball a whole bunch or making a lot of completions with those 19, but he's making them count. Braden Shager, Hawaii, comes in at number 8. He's tied for 5th in the G5 in touchdowns with the 19. He's tied for 2nd of the 2020 guys in rushing attempts per game with the 9, which was kind of shocking. So that's why I wanted to point that out. 2nd of the 2020 guys in rushing yards per game with 51. Number 9, Tucker Gleason, Toledo. He's got the least amount of pass attempts per game of the 2020 guys with 31. He's tied for last of the 2020 guys for pass completions per game. There with Devin Dampier with 19. Cole Snyder, Eastern Michigan. I said we were going to talk about him a little bit later. Here we are. He comes in at number 10, averaging 232 passing yards per game, tied for 2nd of the 2020 guys in rushing attempts per game with 9, giving you 46 yards per game on the ground. Mikey Keene, Fresno State, comes in at number 11. He is the statue of the 2020 guys with 1 rush attempt per game. So he does all of his work through the air. EJ Warner, Rice, I mentioned he would be talked about later. Here we are coming in at number 12. He's averaging 230 passing yards per game. Jalen Rayner, Arkansas State, comes in at number 13, averaging 226 passing yards per game, which is the least of this 2020 group and the least amount of touchdowns of this 2020 group with 8. Number 14, Nicholas Vadiato, Middle Tennessee, 6 in the G5 in big-time throws with 18. And number 15 on the list is Caden Somoza, Ball State, averaging 228 passing yards per game. Lowest average depth of target of the 2020 group was 7 yards. Running backs. Again, top 20 for total touches, top 20 for total yards. If you make it on both of those lists, you make this list this week, cut it down to 12. Running backs, everyone on this list is at 97 yards per game or more with at least 18 opportunities per game. So all these guys were really great. Honestly, you could add one more, but he's only played 1 game. Harrison Whaley, again, had that bye, but had that 27 touch, 170 yards, 1 touchdown game. Ashton Jeanty, Boise State, he's got the most touches per game in the G5 with 26, averaging 202 total yards per game. First in the G5 in touchdowns with 23, leads the G5 in missed tackles force with 90. I think he can make it up to 100 by the end of the year. Running out of time, but I think he can do it. Number 2, Trey Stewart, my offensive player of the week. Jacksonville State, 17 touchdowns, which is 2nd in the G5, tied for 4th in the G5 in missed tackles force with 54. Mekhi Hughes, Tulane, comes in at number 3, he's 4th in the G5 in touchdowns with 13. Number 4, Mario Anderson, Memphis, averaging 17 rush attempts and 4 receptions per game. The 4 receptions per game is actually 2nd in the G5. His 25 yards in the receiving game is also 2nd in all of the G5 for our running backs. Marquez Cooper comes in at number 5. I don't believe he hit it. He might have got close, but he's getting really, really close to 1,000 yards rushing this season. So I think if he did not get it last week, he was really, really close. I think he will get it this week. Ahmad Hardy, Louisiana, comes in at number 6, 9 touchdowns as a freshman, 2nd in the G5 in missed tackles, 4th with 70. Again, Ashton Jeanty on a different level with a 90, a freshman, Ahmad Hardy with 70.
Cooper needs 35 yards to get to 1,000.
All right, so he should get there because he'll probably get 35 touches in the game. Dean Connors, Rice, comes in at number 7, averaging 12 touches per game from the running game, 5 from the passing game. Thus, he's averaging the least amount of rushing yards per game of these 2020 guys with 67 per game. On the flip side, he's averaging the most in the receiving game of the 2020 guys with 35. He's actually leading the G5 in receiving yards per game. Number 2, like I mentioned, is Mario Anderson. It's 25. Number 8, Avery Morrow, Colorado State. Number 9, Quentin Cooley, Liberty, Number 10, Rasul Faison, Utah State. He's tied for the least amount of total yards per game of this group with 97, which is still pretty good. Tied for fourth in the G5 with missed tackles forced with 54. Big drop off. Ismail Mahdi, friend of the podcast, Texas State. He comes in at number 11. He's averaging 98 yards per game. However, he only has 3 touchdowns on the season. And then Terran Stewart, Bowling Green, comes in at number 12. The least amount of touches per game of this group with the 18. Tied for the least amount of total yards per game with the group with 97, with Rasul Faison. And third in the G5 in missed tackles forced with 55. Wide receivers, again, only 11 in this week. All receivers here are averaging 8 or more targets per game, 5 or more receptions per game, and 75 or more yards per game. These guys are in the top 20 in targets and in the top 20 in receiving yards. You make both those top 20s, you make this list, there's 11 guys. Excuse me. Nick Nash comes in at number 1, San Jose State. The only guy averaging double-digit in targets per game with 15. He's averaging 9 receptions per game, which is what only some are getting targeted per game. Averaging 128 yards per game. He's the only one averaging over 100 yards per game. Star asterisk Jalen Royals is also averaging 119. We'll see if he's able to make it back for maybe senior day here in a couple weeks. Has 13 touchdowns on the year and the second highest average depth of target of this group with 13 yards. Number 2, Ricky White, UNLV, tied for second in the G5 in receiving touchdowns with 10. Caden Robinson, App State, comes in at number 3. He's fourth in the G5 in receiving yards per game with 92. Only 4 wide receivers are averaging 90 yards or more per game, and Caden Robinson is one of them. Justice will have to talk afterwards, given that he is done for the season, if we will have him eligible for this going forward. But other than the unlucky touchdown performance, Caden Robinson's been a solid staple of this segment each and every week for all 11 weeks. Corey Rucker, Arkansas State, comes in at number 4. Number 5, DT Sheffield, North Texas, comes in at number 5. He's tied for second in the G5 in receiving touchdowns with 10. Only DT and one other from this group has an average depth of target under 8. His ADOT is 6.7 yards. Who's that other guy who's got the ADOT under 8? It's number 6, Jamal Pritchett, South Alabama. He's got an ADOT of 7.8. These two, when I'm talking about these two, DT Sheffield and Pritchett, also have the highest yak of the group with 8.2 for Pritchett and 8.7 for DT Sheffield. Drawn Newton, Toledo, comes in at number 7. He's tied for second in the G5 in receiving touchdowns with 10. Devontae Ross, Troy, comes in at number 8. He's third in the G5 in receiving touchdowns with 9. Camden Benjamin, Tulsa, comes in at number 9. Number 10, Luke Wysong, New Mexico. And number 11, Omari Kelly, Middle Tennessee. He's averaging the least amount of yards per game of this group of 75. He has the highest average depth of target of this group, 14.8. Moving over to the tight ends, 2020 group, we don't do 20. I know it would be riveting if we did. So we just do the top 5 in targets and receiving yards. And this has kind of been the same the last 4 weeks or so, 3-4 weeks. Maybe moving 4 and 5 around. This is the same as last week. We've got Harold Fanon Jr., Bowling Green, coming in at number 1. He's averaging 9 targets, 8 receptions, 114 yards per game. He's got 6 touchdowns. Those 6 touchdowns are the most in the G5 from the tight end position. Who also has 6 touchdowns is number 2, Tanner Kozel, Ball State. He's got those 6 touchdowns, and he's averaging 7 receptions, on 9 targets and 70 yards. Number 3, Holden Willis of Middle Tennessee. He's averaging 5 receptions on 7 targets for 75 yards. He's only got 3 touchdowns on the season. Dorian Fleming, Georgia State. He comes in at number 4. He's averaging 4 receptions on 6 targets for 45 yards per game. He's got 2 touchdowns on the season. And number 5, Terrence Carter, Louisiana. He's averaging 4 receptions, 4 targets, and 62 yards per game. And he's got 4 touchdowns on the season. That's going to do it for our offensive G5 players this week, our 2020 players. Justice, what do we got for the defensive side of the ball?
All right, we will start off with the defensive ends or edge players. These guys are top 5 in havoc rate after week 11. Havoc rate is a combination. It's a calculation using sacks, tackles for loss, stops, etc., and quarterback pressures. Basically, trying to figure out how many havoc play, if you will. I guess stands for what it is. So defensive end edges. Number 1, Mike Green, Marshall. He is the only player on this list that's been there every single week. I think it's been as low as 3, but he's been pretty high. He's been number 1 the last several weeks. He had 3 sacks again this past week. Leads defensive ends in sacks with 12. He has a havoc rate of 17.5%. Number 2, defensive end, Eric O'Neill, James Madison, havoc rate of 16.2%. He has a rush win rate of 15.7%. Number 3, I believe his first time on the list this year, Ahmed Hassanian, Boise State, havoc rate of 14.6%. And he ranks 3rd in sacks with 10. Number 4, defensive end, Bradley Weaver, Ohio, havoc rate of 14.3%. He has 31 quarterback pressures on the season. And rounding out the top 5, defensive end, Elijah Robinson from Hawaii, havoc rate of 14%. And he has 32 stops, which is basically stopping the opposing offense on 3rd or 4th down. And that ranks 2nd among defensive ends. Moving over to the defensive tackles, using the same criteria of havoc rate. Number 1, defensive tackle, Darius Alexander from Toledo, havoc rate of 10.8%. He has a rush win rate of 11.5%. Number 2, RJ Jackson, Tulsa, havoc rate of 10.3%. He has 18 stops on the season. Number 3, Anthony Hawkins, Bowling Green, havoc rate of 10.2%. He ranks 1st among defensive tackles in sacks with 5. Number 4, Patrick Jenkins, Tulane, havoc rate of 10%. He has 18 quarterback pressures on the season. And coming back to the list this week, I believe this is his 2nd time on the list. Soani Toa from San Jose State, havoc rate of 9.5%. And he has a rush win rate of 10.9%. Now, moving over to the linebackers. These are the top linebackers and tackles per game among the G5. It's been these same 5 guys. I feel like this is the 3rd, maybe 4th week in a row. The order between 2 and 3 has been the only thing that's really changed. And this week they're tied. But number 1, Sean Dolak, Buffalo, having a tremendous season, averaging 11.89 tackles per game. And his missed tackle rate is 3.6%. That's pretty freaking phenomenal. Awesome year for Sean Dolak. Number 2, it's a tie at number 2. Linebacker Travion Barnes, Florida National, averaging 11.11 tackles per game. And he has 11 quarterback pressures on the season. Tied with Travion Barnes for 2nd is Sean Dolak's teammate, Red Murdoch from Buffalo, also averaging 11.11 tackles per game. He has 47 stops on the season. Number 4, Colin Ramos, Navy, 9.56 tackles per game. He also has a pretty low missed tackle rate of 9.5%. And rounding out the top 5 is Jaden Yates from Marshall, averaging 8.89 tackles per game. He has 25 stops on the season. Moving over to the cornerbacks, number one, before I get to that, so cornerbacks and safeties, who we'll be talking about in a minute, they're all ranked according to adjusted net yards per coverage snap. Basically, it's a metric telling you how they're doing when they're targeted. So you're looking at, like, how many completions are made against them, how many yards get made against them, how many interceptions they get, those types of things, and dividing that by the number of coverage snaps they play. But number one and around three is a really good number for the NFL. All these guys we're going to be talking about are well below that, and when we get to safeties, they're all in the negative. The only cornerback in the negative is number one, cornerback Deshaun Peel, Navy, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.216, and he has 4 pass breakups on the season. Number two, cornerback Donovan Platt, Army, adjusted net yards against of 0.122, and he has a quarterback rating against of 45. Number three is cornerback Terrence Spence from James Madison, adjusted net yards against of 0.176, and he ranks first in interceptions among quarterbacks with 5 interceptions. Number four, Rayshawn Pleasant, Tulane, adjusted net yards against of 0.186. He has a quarterback rating against of 31. And rounding out the top 5, cornerback Anthony Johnson Jr., Western Kentucky, adjusted net yards against of 0.224, and he averages 4.4 tackles per game. Moving over to the safeties, again, same metric, adjusted net yards against per coverage snap. A new number one, safety Tyrone Lewis Jr. from Louisiana, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.379. He ranks first in interceptions among safeties with 4. Number two, Jerron Manning, Old Dominion, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.361, and he has a quarterback rating against of 13.9. Number three is safety Jacob Thomas, James Madison, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.287, has a quarterback rating against of 3.8. Number four, Tyrone Lewis's teammate, Tyree Skipper from Louisiana, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.255, and he is tied with Tyrone Lewis in interceptions. They're both first among G5 safeties with 4 interceptions. Rounding out our top 5 and new to the list this week, Malik Dixon Williams, Connecticut, adjusted net yards against of negative 0.205, and he is averaging 5.88 tackles per game. That's going to do it for our 2020 players, which are the top players at the various positions among the G5 through week 11.
That's going to do it for us. Come back and join us next week as we discuss what happened in week 12, as well as look forward to week 13. We give you our waiver wire guys to look for to help you out in week 13 of the 2024 season. As always, we bring you the up-to-date on the latest news and happenings in the world of G5 college football. Again, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a retweet, a like, and a follow. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave those 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.